Welcome back to the Fantasy Hockey Podcast and Unsustainable Wednesdays. We have quite the show for you. A lot of people talk about. I'll give you a little teaser, and Braden Point is featured. Try to take a guess before the show starts where he's going to end up. This is like a kid's show. We tell you, a name of a player, and you've got to guess, I think he's going to be... It's like Dora the Explorer. We tell you, here's a player, and you've got to think about, he's going to be unsustainably high. That's definitely not. There's another teaser.
The only thing that makes this a kid show is it puts people to sleep.
Yes, that's the only thing. And they have chance. We have chance. We don't need you. There you go. There's a lot of fun things for kids. Okay, songs. So let's start off first. Let's start off first with Unsustainably High and just get into the episode here. So I'll take my first one here in Tomas Tatar. Pretty unsustainably high over the past week. So in the last 3 games, he has a 25% shooting, 14.7% on-ice shooting, and 75% of his assists are secondary, which is not fantastic. Last year, only 36% were secondary assists. So he's benefiting a lot from that on-ice shooting percentage. Normally, the higher your secondary assist rate while your on-ice shooting percentage is high, the more you're benefiting from that secondary or from that high on-ice shooting percentage. So to me, Tomas Tatar, I know a lot of people are picking up. His minutes are actually really good, but this is all kind of very, very unsustainable over the last 3 days, and this is when his ownership is increased. It's not like his ownership has steadily been increasing. For the most part, it's increased mostly in these last few games, and largely because of this unsustainable shooting percentage and on-ice shooting percentage.
So I have him on mine as well, although his minutes they're down from last season, and they're even down this week compared to previous weeks. There's not a lot. So I think Tatar, considering how good he's been for a little bit now, is like my biggest sell high candidate right now. I have him in a couple of leagues, actually. The thing that's interesting with him is his career best is a 58-point player, and he's on a team where not a lot has changed for him. So I don't know why anybody would expect much different going forward. So if you're looking for like a 60-point paced player, I guess, then that's about where I'd expect Tatar rest of the season. But right now you can trade him for better than that probably, depending on who you're going after, especially if they're a Habs fan.
Yep, exactly. And luckily, there's a lot of Habs fans. And also, in general, like I have another Hab on this list. I think right now, in general, the Habs are over-indexed. I think a lot of people are buying into the hype. And so I think this is a perfect time to sell on a team hype that also includes a player that's doing really well.
Yeah. Okay, so my first one is, because the Coyotes are the weirdest team in the league, is Connor Garland. Yeah. He's shooting, or rather, he's only getting 13 minutes a game. His shooting percentage actually went up since I wrote this because he scored again last night, because of course he did. He's at 19% shooting on the season, 33% in the last week. He's only expected to have gotten 4.5 goals, and he has 10. So none of this makes any sense. Everything about him is up like 50% from last season, except for the stuff that would actually make him go up 50%, like his time on ice and his power play time and a lot of other things that would factor into that. His on-ice shooting is super high. It's once again, this is just Arizona being weird. I don't understand how this keeps happening, but Garland is going to slow down at some point. You might be able to ride the hot hand, I guess, although if you even believe that's a thing, for a short while, but with his minutes, he needs more minutes. That's the big takeaway. He needs more minutes, and he's never gotten them. So
yeah, like you said, this is just an Arizona thing. You see guys like Connor Garland and Nick Schmaltz take off at certain points, and still everyone is wondering what the hell's happening with Phil Kessel.
Yep, at least he got an assist.
That is true. Also, just in case you're wondering, we are recording this Tuesday morning. So this comes out Wednesday morning. We record Tuesday morning. So when we reference, someone scored last night, we're talking about Monday night in this instance. So I'm going to take my next one here in Matthew Barzal. He gets an automatic point off for spelling Matthew with 1 T. That already is not proper. On top of that, shooting percentage is at 21.4% on the season. And this is a guy who is not necessarily known for being a sniper. Now, one could argue his situation has changed this year, and maybe he's gotten better. He's gotten used to not having JT. He chooses his shot selections better, and that's fine. Sure, I would assume if that happens, a slight increase in shooting percentage. But 21.4% is insanely high, and not something that I expect to continue the rest of the season. Another thing is that his on-ice shooting percentage is pretty high at 13.3%. What's absolutely ludicrous is it's 22% over the last 7 days. So over these last 7 days, it's gotten absolutely insane. In my opinion, he's still around a 70-plus point player this year, potentially. And I wouldn't even say potentially. I feel pretty comfortable saying that he's a 70-plus this year. But that being said, I think if you can trade Barzal, let's say you're in a Cats league, right? And you can get someone who's a 60-point player with far better peripherals, that might be worth it for your team. And so I wouldn't really sell Barzal. I'd maybe shop him around and see how people value him. I'd maybe, if you have a trade out there for, like, let's say a Burns or something like that, and throwing in Barzal into the package and getting a player back sweetens the deal, that kind of thing, I'd think about it. But for the most part, I'd just shop and see where your league values him at, because there might be someone who values him way too highly and maybe values him at his performance for this past week versus what his performance over the whole season has been, which is still pretty insane and should come down because of that shooting percentage.
So with Barzal, the last week was only 2 games, so you can only take so much into account for that. But I agree that especially his goals are going to come down. But I still think his assists are, like, all right. That on-ice shooting percentage on the season does lead me to believe it'll come down a little bit, but the Islanders have been pretty good on the power play, but not been getting very many opportunities. So it'll be interesting to see what happens when they start to level out there.
Yep.
My last one is Yanni Gourde. Yanni Gourde.
He always makes this list every single year.
I know. He's playing even less minutes than last season, which were already low. He's on a 53-point pace, but just kind of blew up over the last week with a bunch of points, last couple weeks anyway. He's shooting 50% on the... I don't know. Like, his shooting percentage is actually on the season all right, but just has grown quite a bit in the last couple of weeks and is not sustainable. He doesn't play any power play time. His line is... He's on the 4th line. Like, it just stop. We've gotten a few questions about whether he's worth picking up, and I know that he's got some eye-popping numbers in the last, 3 or 4 games. It's just, he just can't. Not with his deployment, not with his power play time. He just can't. He also gets deployed in the defensive zone quite a bit.
I mean, we could take literally what we've said in the past about Yanni Gourde and apply it to Yanni Gourde right now, and it would be the same thing. He does.
He's also named Yanni. I can't draft him or pick him up.
I kind of like the name Yanni. I mean, that could be like an alt name. Moving into my last one here, Phillip Danault, last 3 games, 20.6% on-ice shooting. Only shot once each game, so that's, something. Minutes are up, which is good, but his offensive zone start is really, really low at between 30 and 40%, depending on the time frame you look at, depending on the game you look at. He's usually within that 30 to 40% range. That's not good. Normally, when your on-ice shooting percentage is 20.6% and you get a very high defensive zone start percentage, normally that means you're benefiting from a ton of luck and a lot of odd man rushes and breaks. And that's what I'd wager Phillip Danault is currently having. He's a very good player, a very, very good real-life player, and has stretches where he's very good offensively in fantasy. But for the most part, Phillip Danault is mostly, right now, ridiculously unsustainably high. I'd take a flyer on him. He's playing 20-ish minutes a game. I'd pick him up while he's hot and hope for the best. He has a decent schedule this week. So I picked him up, for example, for today or for tomorrow, which is Wednesday. So today's Tuesday, tomorrow was Wednesday. So I picked him up for Wednesday, just because why not? He's, one game I'm going to get out of him, but I wouldn't expect this to last long term.
Yeah, I mean, Danault has always been, and this is sort of something I referenced about Gallagher, actually, at the beginning of the season, is that Danault is utilized as a defensive center in Montreal. And I guess, honestly, I haven't looked at Gallagher's numbers defensively, but he must also be considered a defensive player despite his clear offensive prowess. But because of that, when whoever Danault is paired up with typically is going to underperform what I think they should be able to do, just because they're going to get defensive zone starts pretty often and be utilized in a different way. So, yeah, and that's Danault. It's not. I think it's less his wingers. That's how they want to play Danault. So whoever winds up on his wing kind of has to go along for the ride. So,
and like I said, this benefit, like him playing really well right now, is simply the team around him overachieving.
The fact that he starts in
benefiting.
defensive zone so often is just, that's the big thing to me. But the thing I've always said about Gallagher is that I think he is going to break out some year, and it's going to be a year when he is not on Dano's line because he'll be able to play more offensively, I think. So I've just been waiting for Kotkaniemi to move up, or Suzuki or Paling or one of these guys to get a high center spot and play with Gallagher. But that is neither here nor there. So let's move into Unsustainably Low. Okay, my first one, Vincent Trocheck. Now, he doesn't look good even from the numbers, honestly, because they're not playing in very good minutes, and all of his numbers are down because he's not playing in very good minutes. But he did just come back from injury, and I do think they're easing him back into the lineup. And that's the big takeaway. They leaned so heavily on Trocheck last season. He was like a 20-minute a game player. In the last week, he's only played about 16 minutes a game. I expect Trocheck is still great. Unless he has a lingering issue, a lingering injury, which would be the biggest issue. I think that his numbers should all start to climb slowly as they bring him back to the reliance they have on him, because he is very clearly their second best center, and a very good center too at that. So I've heard a lot of people worried about Trocheck long term. Should I drop him? I don't think so, especially not in hits leagues. He's still throwing the body a little bit, but I think as his ice time climbs, you'll see everything else climb, including points.
Yeah, I just hope the minutes increase. Until the minutes increase,
I'm convinced they will. Yeah. I would not drop him.
I wouldn't drop him. Would you say enough that he's a buy low, or is he similar, in your opinion, to Sagan, where you don't trade, but you also don't buy?
I would probably wait until he gets like 2 or 3 17 to 18-minute games in a row and then move for him.
Okay. Well, I can live with that.
Because if it is a lingering issue, that's what you don't want to.
Yeah.
You don't want to buy into. But
that's the thing we're most worried about, right? Is that there's something still kind of lingering. I mean, that's the only thing I can think of that would explain 12 minutes a game.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we just don't know how Quenneville is going to react to an injured. Basically, like, Trocheck is basically a star. I know he's not.
Yeah.
He's only had like the one season where he really broke out and then kind of been injury riddled ever since. But with Florida playing as well as they are, right? Like, they don't really need to lean on Trocheck as much. So it's in their best interest to kind of ease him back in instead of putting him in for 20 minutes a night and waiting for him to fall apart.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so my first one here is going to be a guy that we've gotten a lot of questions about. I mean, you see this guy plastered all over Twitter, all over our YouTube comments. A lot of people kind of wondering what to do with him from many perspectives, and that's Taylor Hall. He's unsustainably low by a wide margin. I had zero qualms putting him here. 2.8% shooting. That's it on the season. Insanely low. Last year, he was around 9 to 10, depending on the stretch you look at for the most part. His expected goals for is 6, and he has 2. So remember that for a second. His on-ice shooting percentage and IPP are pretty much in line for the most part. Could do better or worse in one or the other, but for the most part, in line, assume that's all good. If you give him those missing goals, so those missing goals he has, he's actually on a 99-point pace, which is up from last year. So Taylor Hall is... all he's missing are the goals, and his shots are actually up 8% on the season. So to me, Taylor Hall is it's just a matter of time until he finds his groove again, until he clicks with the new line mates, because really there's been a lot of line shuffling going around. I think it's just a matter of time until Taylor Hall clicks, he gets a few goals, and all of a sudden Taylor Hall is right back to where you'd expect him to be.
Yeah, I agree. We have talked in Discord quite a bit about what happens if he gets traded.
Yep.
I mean, we're seeing more and more rumors about this, so I would think it'll happen at some point. I'm under the impression that if and when, let's assume he does get traded, that it's going to be a net positive for him, just negative for everybody on the Devils.
Yeah.
Because wherever he goes, you'd assume he's going to be top 6 at least and top power play on a better power play and with a better center. This isn't like a dig at Heischer and Hughes, but they're just not quite there yet.
Yep.
I don't think. They're not able to support the level that Hall's playing at the stage of the career that they're in. So we'll see. All right, my last one I was so happy to have this player show up this season. And I get that he's been slow lately, but he actually, like, his underlying numbers are actually pretty good, and that's Joel Armia. So we're actually another Hab. except this time on Unsustainably Low instead of Unsustainably High. So Armia, the thing that held Armia back a lot last season was ice time, among other things. I think that's the main thing. They're playing in below 16 minutes a game. He did get some power play time last season, but not a ton. And all that is increasing quite a bit. So now they're doing that like 1A, 1B thing, like a lot of teams are doing this season, it seems like, on the power play. But that's beneficial for Armia because he's getting some extra time there. I know that he's been slow, no points in a handful of games now, but his shot pace is pretty good and actually increasing over this dry spell. He's shooting roughly 3 shots a game, which is right where you want it to be. His goals, everything is like in line. His on-ice shooting is a little high, but beyond that, it's just the fact that he hasn't been part of a lot of goals. So his on-ice shooting is 14%, which is too high. But the fact that his IPP, meaning the amount of goals that go in that he's a part of, is only 40%. That's too low, way too low. So I expect that to come up, and with that is going to come more points. And we're talking about a guy that was on nobody's radar and is sitting at he's at a 46-point pace, but he's due for a lot more. If you put that IPP up where he was last season, he's due for 50% more points, which would put him at 15 points in 18 games with good peripherals. And that's not necessarily something you need to keep season long, but he's a guy that he's at a 200 hit pace too. So, that at least puts him up with the likes of the Dustin Browns and Kyle Palmieri's and other guys that play similar roles, I think.
Are you sure you want to compare him to Kyle Palmieri, given where he's going to be on this list later on?
Yes.
My last one here will be Jonathan Marchessault of the Vegas Golden Knights. His struggles are apparent where they're coming from. His shots are down only a little bit, only 3%, not much, so he's shooting about the same as last year. The places where he's struggling are twofold. One is his shooting percentage, which is down 23% from last year. Not great. He's off by about 2 to 3 expected goals for, which is not a huge margin, but it's enough to make a little bit of a difference. His shooting percentage in general over his career is actually somewhat low for how much he shoots. He's actually more of just a 10% shooter instead of like a sniper 13 to 15% shooter type. So right now he's sitting at around 6% shooting percentage, and his on-ice shooting percentage is really low at only 6.5%. Now the Vegas Golden Knights in general have never so far, in their low, small existence so far, they normally don't have that high of a shooting percentage. So his on-ice shooting percentage with the Vegas Golden Knights has been somewhat low. But even then, his 6.5 on-ice shooting percentage at the moment is just ridiculously low, down 35% from last year. And so there's a lot of room to improve for Jonathan Marchessault. And to me, a large part of it is simply just the team around him has to get better. And I think it will. I think he has the line mates and the opportunities to get better. Well, at the same time, I will say that last year we were at the same point saying, what's going on with Jonathan Marchessault, and not really much changed. But then again, we're comparing this to last year, which was a down year, right, for Jonathan Marchessault. And I think he at minimum gets back to what he was last year. So I wouldn't expect him to get up to elite numbers or anything like that. But there are areas here where he can improve by quite a bit and makes him not droppable and most likely not shoppable either.
Yeah, I agree. I've got March in my Dynasty League, and I actually had a couple people knock on the door about him, but I still love him. His just peripherals are great, even when he's not doing something else. So, and I agree with you too. I think he's closer to like a 65, 70 point guy, pacing for the rest of the season.
And if you care, he has more face-off wins this season. He's on pace for, I think, about double or something like that in face-off wins this season.
Somebody, we got an email or a review or something about how I keep saying pacing at. I'm sorry. I'll try to stop. So yeah, I expect him at like a 65-point pace. There you go.
There you go.
Let's move into Sustainably High. I'm going to go straight back to the Vegas Golden Knights and talk about Max Pacioretty. Patches.
I have him too. Yep.
The crazy thing about him is he's reminding me of Huberdeau earlier in the season as far as he has 20 points in 22 games, and it actually seems low to me. His IPP is lower than it should be. His on-ice is fine at 11.5%. His shooting percentage is down. He's only shooting at 9%, although he's right in line with expected goals. His power play time on ice is up. His time on ice in general is up. His shot pace is better than ever, just about.
It's exploded, 40% increase in shots.
Yeah, it's right back to where it was before he started kind of regressing or whatever was going on, right back into the 300 plus area where you'd like to see him. As a result, I think just from the way he's being played a little bit, his hits pace is a little bit down, but who cares when he's playing like this? He's almost point per game, and everything is showing that he should be doing better, which is nuts. So very high on Pacioretty rest of the season. He has really clicked in Vegas. Took a season or two, but he's there now. So cool. I guess they just needed Stone to come along, right? But
yeah, he Stone solves all the problems. But again, remember, Stone can patch the leak.
Stop it.
Okay, my first one here is going to be a guy that you build at the beginning of the season as a mini John Carlson, baby Carlson, and that's Keith Yandle. He's finally starting to show up again on a ridiculous point streak now. His shooting percentage is same this year as last year, which is a good thing. On a shooting percentage is 25% higher than last year, but it's been inflated in just the past week. And so I wouldn't worry about that too much. The fact that it's higher is also partially a good thing for him. But so part of the reason it's actually really inflated at the moment is if you go look at Jonathan Huberdeau and Alexander Barkov's shooting percentages and their on-ice shooting percentages, it's insane. I think Huberdeau and Barkov each have like an 18% on-ice shooting. They're each shooting at around, that 17%. They're both feeding off of each other. And that's one of the large reasons as well that Keith Yandle is benefiting. And their power play shooting percentage is ridiculously high. And of course, the shooting percentage, the on-ice shooting percentage that I'm looking at is at all strengths. And that takes into account the power play. And so he should have a slightly higher on-ice shooting percentage than you'd see from other defensemen. It's kind of similar to John Carlson if you include the power play, just because they play with snipers on the power play, and that will increase the on-ice shooting percentage. But still, it's a little high at where it is. The reason he's on Sustainably High, and the reason I actually have real John Carlson on Sustainably High, which I'll talk about in a second, is because I still see him as a 60-point D-man. I know that we've gotten a lot of questions about Keith Yandle on whether he can repeat last season, and I think he definitely can. I don't really see an avenue to where he doesn't, simply because the power play is so good. Alexander Barkov and Jonathan Huberdeau are insane and wild. Yes, they are unsustainably high at the moment. They are Alexander Barkov and Jonathan Huberdeau. And when you have an opportunity to get in on whatever the hell they're doing, you're just going to have weeks where you go off. And that's what I see from Keith Yandle. And on top of that, you have consistency in a very good power play and on a very, very good power play. I'd argue maybe the best power play in the league. From the eye test, to me, I think Florida's power play is the best power play in the league, talent-wise. I know that some could contend Boston, some could contend Washington, perhaps because of Ovechkin, but honestly, the talent on Florida's power play is ridiculous. So to me, the reason I have him here is simply, like I said, I think he gets up to last year, and I wouldn't worry much about him at all.
Yeah, I agree. There was the concern early was his time on ice, but
yeah,
the fact of the matter is they're playing him in the offensive zone so much. It's like 70% for a defenseman. So, yeah, they know where his shortcomings lie. But they've got enough with everybody back now, or just about everybody. I guess Uyghur's out, but with most of their other defensemen that they can use actually defensively back, they don't have to rely on him to do that anymore. So they can just kind of isolate him in the offensive zone. Although his time on ice has gone up in general anyway. So,
yeah, which is a good thing.
Yeah. So my second one here is another defenseman in Florida, but not on the Panthers, and that's Erik Cernak. Now, I have a feeling there's going to be a good percentage of people here that have no idea who I'm talking about. Cernak is a Cats League specific player. Basically, Cernak and Darnell Nurse are almost identical. They're very, very similar, except Cernak is not getting the points. I actually think he's due for some more points. He's due for at least a goal. And he's been shooting so much. His on-ice shooting is only 5% right now. So you can definitely see him getting some more points, although that's not really where his value lies. Last season, he paced at about 20 points. That's about where I'd expect him again, 20 to 25 points or so. But that's not why you pick him up. You pick him up because he hits a lot. He's at a 251 point hit pace, which is going up over the last few weeks. He's on a 180 shot pace, which is going up over the last few weeks. And he's on a 138 block pace, which is going up over the last few weeks. So everything about him is just looking better and better. He's getting to play his game more, and his ice time has been the same as last season, and he's just getting more utilization out of it, it seems like. So, and he's a defensive zone guy, which is obvious because he's a banger that just kind of, gets a lot of blocks. Yeah. So if you have him or you have him available in hits, blocks, and PIMS leagues, because he does get PIMS too, not a ton, but he gets them. He gets fights occasionally too. He's definitely worth hanging on to. Although Tampa doesn't have the best off-night schedule, but he's only something like 11% owned, which seems a little bit low to me. But I guess it depends on if you have a Cats banger league or not.
Yeah, Chernak, we were high on him preseason, and then at the beginning of the season, he just wasn't getting the hits, shots, or blocks that you would have expected. But over these last 10 or so games, he's really, really picked it up. So I'd keep an eye on Chernak. But again, another thing to remember with Chernak is Tampa does not have good off nights for the whole season. So he's a tough defenseman to recommend to pick up as like a fifth or sixth defenseman, the one that would be on your bench, simply because you'd be benching him a lot of the time. So when it comes to from a streamer perspective, Chernak is actually one of the worst options you can pick up.
I have him long term in a bunch of leagues.
Yeah. If you have him long term and have a spot for him, then it makes sense. But if you don't have a spot for him, he's tough to recommend simply because of the off nights.
Yeah.
Okay, my last one here will also be a defenseman in John Carlson. Now, I think I've maybe talked about this before, but I wanted to touch it again, just because I've seen a lot of people asking whether they should sell high. He's not a 120-point defenseman, but I feel pretty comfortable, actually, with saying that he has a high chance of ending up a point-per-game defenseman.
Yeah.
I feel pretty confident he can do that at this point. His shooting percentage is high at 12%, but it's actually been coming down as of late. So over the last few games, his shooting percentage has come down quite a bit. And so he's actually normalizing a lot, which is good. And that means that going forward for the rest of the season, you can expect that. His on-ice shooting percentage is actually right in line with last year. It's his IPP that is a tad high, but not too much, to be honest. And if you watch the games, the eye test will tell you he actually factors into play a lot more than he did last year. But still, the IPP should come down a little bit. But still, let's say the IPP comes down, you're still looking at an 82-point defenseman around. So I wouldn't trade John Carlson personally. I don't even think I'd do. I think that the conversation that I've seen the most is Brent Burns or John Carlson. That's been the question I've seen posed the most.
I would take Burns. I feel like you might argue with me, but I would take Burns.
I think it depends on your team's composition a lot. I think it depends what you rely on Burns for, what you rely on John Carlson for. I think if you're relying on simply points and power play points, I'd take John Carlson. Simply because I like the team John Carlson is on more than I like the Sharks. That being said, for peripheral-wise and shots-wise, I'd take Brent Burns all day with a little bit of a decrease in points and a little bit of a decrease in power play points. To me, they're very similar, I think. From a just overall ranking standpoint, they're very, very similar. I think it just comes down to what you need on your team. But in my opinion, I'm not moving Carlson. I don't want to move John Carlson. My take on him is you're not going to get what he's worth. I think Burns is the only comparable, and that is it.
Yeah.
And from a forward standpoint, I just don't think it's worth moving. Like, yeah, I've seen, some Carlson for like Marner trades and things like that. And it's like, okay, cool. Yeah, you did that. But I mean, finding a defenseman like John Carlson is so rare. And by trading for a guy like Marner, sure, you get a really good player, but you get a guy whose point upside is similar to John Carlson's in some regard. If you take into account like the rarity of a defenseman point versus what Marner could get, even if Marner gets like 90 points, you probably lose that trade because you also now lost a forward streamer spot, and a forward streamer spot is much more valuable than a defenseman streamer spot. More often than not, at least, especially if you're in a peripheral.
That depends on your team comp.
Depends on your team comp, all that kind of stuff. But for the most part, I'd say normally that's not worth it. So I advocate hold John Carlson. I don't see him slowing down anytime soon, unless he's on like a 120-point pace. In which case, that's kind of ridiculous. But for the most part, I expect him more to fall under like an 82-point pace.
All right, my next one is actually Andrei Burakovsky. Now, I'm calling him sustainably high while he's on that top line. I mentioned as soon as the injuries started happening, as soon as Rantanen went out, I was like, the one player that I would be interested in getting top line is Burakovsky. He hasn't really gotten that opportunity much in his career yet, and he does seem to be trying to show something over in Colorado. He got the opportunity. He's really running. A lot of his numbers are just silly, but so I'm not necessarily saying that I expect him to put up multiple points a game or anything, but he's in a position to succeed now. He's getting more power play time, obviously due to injuries, and being next to McKinnon is going to help anybody. So ice time increase is obvious, but it's really these last. I only like him while he's on this top line. Let's put it that way. It doesn't even, the numbers don't even really matter to me that much. It's just a matter of I think that he can be valuable given the right deployment, and he has the right deployment right now, and that's kind of like full stop. Everything is increasing for him as a result of ice time and result of better line mates and offensive deployment and all that good stuff. So Burakovsky, while he's on that top line, I like him. As soon as he moves off, I probably don't like him again. So just bear that in mind.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. As long as he's on that top line, I think he's sustainably high too.
Yep.
Okay, moving into sustainably low. Now, if at the beginning of the show you guessed Braden Point would be on sustainably low, congrats! You've won. You've won nothing, but you've won something.
So many people are going to be mad at you.
A little bit of pride. You also won some anger. Congratulations. Or pain if you own him, I guess. So Braden Point, like we said before, we don't really like playing the told you so game, but I did warn pretty specifically at the beginning of the season that this could happen. One, because we saw Tampa do this last year when they struggled. They have struggled quite a bit, and now they are testing things out. Braden Point has kind of been all over the place since coming back, minutes-wise, deployment-wise. We might be seeing a 70-point Braden Point, which is kind of what we had said at the beginning of the season. The danger of drafting Braden Point was not the injury risk. It was not even deployment. There was no danger about that stuff. The danger for me with Braden Point, and even going forward if you're thinking about trading for him or whatever, the danger with him is that his gap is so big. Like, his floor is probably around 70 points, and his ceiling is like 90.
Was the biggest thing to me.
What?
He shot 21% last season.
So the shooting percentage, but you see, so here's the thing too that's interesting, is the shooting percentage actually at even strength wasn't that crazy. What was insane was his shooting percentage on the power play, which was 39%. He led the league in power play goals, but he did that on a 39% shooting on the power play. He has no power play goals so far this season. And so if you assume that his power play shooting percentage is going to come down to normal, which is like 15 to 20%, let's say, then that's already a ton of goals right there knocked off of Braden Point. And so to me, that the fear was, and still is, you're looking at a 70 to 90 point guy, something like that, maybe 65, honestly, if things go horribly wrong. And you're probably going to need to pay like 80 point price for Braden Point. And that's scary.
Yep.
And you had to pay that also in draft capital. I mean, I think people got really lucky. I think people got insanely lucky that Braden Point got injured. Because I think that if Braden Point would have been healthy or wouldn't have held out, we would have seen Braden Point go in the first 3 rounds. And that didn't happen simply because of the injuries and everything. I think if that wouldn't have happened, if the holdout wouldn't have happened, if the injury wouldn't have happened, I think we'd be having a very different conversation right now where everyone would be freaking the hell out about Braden Point. And because that didn't happen, while people are still freaking out about Braden Point, people aren't freaking out too much because they got him probably in the 5th or 6th rounds. That's the only reason I think that the freak out isn't bigger than it is. But here's a few numbers for you. Now I'll actually show you what's nice about Braden Point. Power play percentage is actually down from last year. So they're running a little bit more of that second power play percentage situation going on. His shots are down 15% from last year. That's not good. His shooting percentage is actually somewhat fine on the season, maybe a little bit higher for him than normal, but it is low over the last 30 days. So since coming back, he was on a tear at first, and over the last 30 days or so, it's actually kind of been low. So I would expect that to come up a little bit, but over the season, he's at, I think, 13%, which is a little bit low considering he's at 0% on the power play. So that's why it's low. He's doing fine at even strength. His even strength goals are fine at the moment at 13%, but it's his power play percentage that's really low. His power play shooting percentage, where he has no goals on the power play. What's crazy about him, and this is what makes him unsustainably low, is that his on-ice shooting percentage is actually 16.2%. That's unsustainably high. So his on-ice shooting percentage is about as good as you're going to hope for a forward, and yet his IPP is unsustainably low at 44%. Now, that to me tells me two things. One, he's not factoring into as many goals as he did last year, which is not a good thing, especially considering how high that on-ice shooting percentage is. And on top of that, it doesn't matter. Like, if they're going to normalize, right? Like, what you're seeing right now from Braden Point is probably what you expect from a assist standpoint. Because if that IPP comes up, but his on-ice shooting percentage comes down, you're kind of at the same place. It doesn't really matter. Like, right now, you're kind of seeing who Braden Point is. And like I said already, the power play shooting percentage is a really concerning thing because he now has 0, but I don't see a way that he's going to get up to that 39%, right? So, yeah, Braden Point to me is, like I said, I think he's a solid 5th, 6th rounder with a lot of upside, but I wouldn't pay more than that price for him if you're thinking of acquiring him, and adjust expectations.
Yep. Okay. My first one, a lot of Vegas on here today in several different sections. This is fun. They almost made it in every section.
Almost.
Is Paul Stastny. He's still at 30% owned, which is kind of surprising. Stastny's a point scorer. I get that, like, and an injury guy. He just tends to always get hurt. But he was he was at a 70-point pace last season, except for the injuries. This season, not there. He's kind of not been able to click for some reason. He showed up really well at the beginning of the season, and then ever since then, hasn't really factored in, and now he's been demoted. Cody Eakin's playing second line, which, I mean, come on. But I do expect Stastny to jump back up there. But the thing is, he's not, given the player that he is, the only league where I might consider holding him is a deep points-only league. Stastny doesn't give you anything except for points. His shots are terrible. All of the rest of his peripherals are terrible. So all you're looking for is points. And if he's not giving you points, he's not worth holding on to, and he's not giving you points. And he's not in a position to give you points now. So the fact that he's 30% owned is way too high. He should be dropped in most leagues.
Yep, I agree with that, unfortunately. I think it's disappointing. He was doing well, but it's just not happening for him right now. Or Vegas, really. I mean, they really need to patch whatever the hell is happening right now because it's a problem.
Except for patches.
Patches
is cool.
Yeah, because patches fixes things. In real life, too. So my next one here is Victor Arvidsson on the Nashville Predators. He is a goal guy first and foremost, right? We agree on that, correct?
Yep.
Okay, our Victor Arvidsson is a goal guy. I think we can all agree on that. And his shots are down 32%. When your shots are down,
that's the biggest problem.
You can't get goals. And his shooting percentage is not bad at 14%. That's a good thing. That's what you'd expect from a guy who's a goal-first guy like Victor Arvidsson. His on-ice shooting percentage is a touch high, and IPP is a tad low. But again, bring those two together, you're seeing something normal. With these shot dips, Victor Arvidsson, to me, is more of like a 55-point guy and just not that many goals. Victor Arvidsson is literally a needs to shoot to be relevant guy. Reminds me a little bit of Jakub Vrana on a better Vrana, right? You need those shots. Better. Otherwise, it's just not the same. And so unless his shots come back up, like Arvidsson is a tough guy to recommend in a lot of formats.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe this is just wishful thinking, but I do expect that he'll turn it around at some point. And the thing is, I think we're going to show him up as a buy low at some point in the future once his shooting comes back up. But we'll see.
I agree.
I don't want to predict that now because if it doesn't happen, you're just screwed. But
yeah, I don't think I'd be buying right now. I think that he could eventually maybe become a buy low, but
I would wait for like 2 weeks worth of good shots.
I also think that the bottom has not fallen out, which is kind of crazy. But I don't think it's fallen out yet. I don't think people have completely given up on him. Like, I think you can still wait like 2 weeks and people will completely give up on him and you can get him for absolutely nothing. Or honestly, I could see him starting to get dropped in like a week or two.
Yep. All right, my next one. Is it just like people just don't want to get rid of defensemen? Is that because Seth Jones is 95% owned?
Yep.
He's 95% owned. And he's on a 43-point pace. And last season, he was only on a 50-point pace. He's not... I don't know why he keeps getting billed as this, like, elite defenseman. I guess his blocks are good, but there's no way that many of us are in blocks leagues. And his hits are, like, just okay. So I don't really know why he continues to get drafted so high. His peripherals are just mediocre compared to like who would be going around him. He doesn't get a whole bunch of power play points. He's only got 3 on the season. He only had 10 last season. And he only missed like 7 games last season. So that's pretty indicative of what you could expect. Columbus' power play is terrible. And he's sharing a lot of the power play time with Werenski, which is not, we've talked about this in the past, is typically not a good scenario for anybody on the power play, actually. It usually just means the power play is not going to be as good if you have 2 defensemen running it. But everything else is down, too. His time on ice, is about the same. His shots are down. His Corsi 4 is down. His shooting percentage is down, but let's assume that goes back to normal. He has 1 more goal. Big deal. Nothing looks good to me. Nothing looks good. Unless you're in a blocks league, I guess. But, I don't understand why he's 95% owned. If you're in a shallow league, you can drop Seth Jones. I hope you didn't draft him in like the 7th round or something, because he just, every single season he gets overvalued.
Columbus in general, too, just doesn't have a good power play. It's Tortorella. Tortorella's never been really known for a good power play. And Columbus in general doesn't have one. And like you said, when you run 2 defensemen on the power play, it's inherently bad for one or both of the defensemen.
It's bad for everybody.
Yeah.
This power play doesn't click as well, historically.
Yep. It's pretty much proven with numbers. But if you don't believe in numbers, then, well, I don't know what to tell you.
Seth Jones is an attractive guy. You can draft him for prettiness. He's pretty.
He is. It's kind of like Ryan Reeves and Evander Kane.
Pretty guy.
Although Evander Kane actually, Evander Kane's like prettiness per 60 graphed with his goals per 60 is very high, which is what you want.
Yeah.
Well, Wednesday episode.
I have one more.
Oh, you have one more. Okay, yeah.
You only had 2?
I only had 2 because I thought Braden Point and Victor Arvidsson were already too much to handle. Yeah. And so I didn't want to.
You also hinted at this player.
Oh, I did. I hinted 4D chess.
Uh-huh. Okay. So my last one is Kyle Palmieri. So I think he's not necessarily droppable, but this is what happens every year with him. He comes out with a bunch of goals in the beginning of the season, and it's really weird, and none of it makes any sense. And everybody's like, this is great. And typically a lot of them are on the power play, and then he just regresses into a 50-point player. And he's already done that early this season. So he's still above his expected goals by 2. His shooting percentage is above last season. The concerning stuff is that his power play percentage is down, and the real concerning thing is his shot pace is down, which he needs to keep his shot pace up to even be who he is in general, which is still a 55-point guy. But he's also on line 2 now, which is not good.
One of the things too with him is his power play shooting percentage right now is 25%. Last year he finished the season at 13%. One of the things that makes me more concerned about him and long-term sustainably low is that if he's relying so much on the power play at the moment, as soon as Taylor Hall leaves, you got to assume that power play gets significantly worse.
Yep.
And there you go. That is your Unsustainable Wednesday. Don't mind Brandon here with the please stand by if you're watching this on YouTube. He doesn't know how to charge a camera battery, so hence he has died.
I do know. I just didn't know we were recording a video today. Those of you that are watching this probably realize it's the first time we've done it.
Yeah, this is our first time doing a live show, in essence, with a video. So there you go.
It's not... Having a video doesn't make it a live show, you bum.
It makes it a live show.
It makes us have video. It's still in the past. It's still pre-recorded.
Technically, for us, it's in the future. Technically, right now, my face and my video is in the future.
I hate listening to you.
Think about
so
that.
much.
I'm so sad I don't have your reaction on camera now. Anyways, there you go. That's your Unsustainable Wednesday. Stay tuned for a bust watch and for hot hands and everything. And if you haven't already, go check out Brandon's Fantasy Hockey 101 video and episode on streamer value. And other than that, we will catch you on Friday for the weekend preview. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Yep, thanks for listening.